and the Bitcoin industry rise, the gloves are coming off over the Clarity Act. Last week, Jamie Dimon cursed out Brian Armstrong on national television and said they will fight this bill to the very end. Well, today we finally hear from the CEO of Coinbase, and the response might actually surprise you. So let's play that clip and we will chat about it. And I'll give you an update of where we currently stand with the Clarity Act and everything we need to know.
Well, I've got a lot of respect for Jamie Dimon, so it was kind of sad to hear that. JP Morgan's a great company. He's put up incredible numbers there. I feel like I've learned a lot from him as a CEO. And ultimately, this isn't really about Jamie Dimon or me, even though people like to focus on that. It's just about how we get clear rules in America so that this industry can get built here and benefit everyone. I think that would be good for American consumers. I think it'd be good for the banks. There's a whole set of new provisions and benefits that banks get in there. In this draft legislation. It would be great for crypto companies as well. Most importantly, it's good for America. So hopefully we can get past the absolutisms and just see if we can get this bill over the finish line.
And I hear your point on the policy piece. I think one of the reasons this has drawn so much attention is just because it's not very often that you hear one of the biggest CEOs in America talk like that about somebody else. I wonder why you think that you've sort of drawn so much personal animosity from Dimon, especially as you say, when you have so much respect for him.
Yeah, honestly, I'm like a little perplexed by that. I think in general, when people communicate through the media, nuance gets lost. Same thing with social media.
There's not a ton of nuance and full of shit, I have to say.
I agree. I mean, yeah, I think it's better just in general to get in a room and chat one-on-one with people. That usually solves it. I've had opportunities to do that with Jamie and other people on his team who are great in the past. And so, yeah, I don't know exactly what that's all about. Like crypto, you have to remember, is the most bipartisan issue right now in DC, in my view. And just there's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, not to mention 50 million Americans who've used crypto. There's about 3 million advocates who've signed up to stand with crypto.org who wanted to elect pro-crypto candidates. So there's a big movement behind this of people who just want to see clear rules on the books. And we saw Senators Tillis and also Brooks. I thought they did a really great job of trying to bring both sides together, the bank lobby and the crypto lobby, and say, hey, you guys got to work out a deal. A compromise means that both sides are going to leave feeling a bit unhappy. We didn't love aspects of it, of where it landed. I imagined that they wouldn't either, but I thought we could both live with it. And so at this point, I think the banks got really a lot of what they asked for in that they said they didn't want any rewards paid on idle balances. They got that. They wanted additional rulemaking. They wanted an anti-evasion language. They wanted disclosures on stablecoins, marketing restrictions. They really got all those things. So I think at this point, I'm hoping that we can move forward and go with what the Senate Banking Committee drafted as a compromise.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's what you call media training, right? That was a perfect answer from someone, obviously, clearly he's been trained on what to say. Very political answer. But I just kind of want to focus on the substance of, because he buried the lead there, right? Like the journalist, obviously, shout out to Politico, shout out to, what was that ladies' podcast? I do want to give a shout out. I'll find it. But shout out for, it is The Conversation with Dasha Burns on Politico. So shout out to her for recording that podcast. And she obviously tried to steer the conversation in terms of trying to get Brian Armstrong to react to the comment. He didn't, in the way that would essentially lead to a mudslinging contest, right? Because he wants to avoid that completely. And it kind of reminds me of the answer that Senator Lummis gave a week ago when she was asked, hey, like, what are your thoughts on Jamie Dimon basically saying, hey, look, this is BS and stuff like that. And she gave a very good answer. Her answer was fantastic. She basically said, like, look, like, he could be misleading people, but I would like to think that he just hasn't read the bill, right? And that answer does two things, right? It points out the obvious, right? Like, he could be misleading people, which you guys know exactly where we stand on this. And then at the same time, it does give him the benefit of the doubt. And Brian Armstrong specifically didn't fall into that exact same trap that Senator Lummis avoided so masterfully, right? And the way that he answered it was basically like, look, like, I'm above this. I'm going to take the high road. This doesn't trigger me. If we had a one-on-one conversation, I doubt he would speak to me that way. The media does kind of get these bombastic, quotes. I think the reporter, the journalist, the podcaster was right to kind of push back on that and be like, there isn't a lot of nuance in when you call something BS, right? But Brian Armstrong buried the lead there in terms of his analysis. And one of the things that stuck out to me the most was the marketing aspect of it, which is fascinating to me, right? So the banks essentially don't want stable coins to be marketed. Why? Right? Another thing as well that stood out to me in terms of Brian Armstrong, and remember, these are all concessions that they've made already. Another thing that they conceded was like idle balances. Why? You have to ask yourself, why? Is it really about consumer protection? Is it really about consumer protection? And my answer, and this is at the end of the day, this is a talk show, so I can offer my opinion on this. I think Senator Lummis and Brian Armstrong are trying to thread the needle as much as possible to get the bill across the finish line. But my response to this is, dude, no. They clearly don't want this because they don't want competition. Like, that's what it comes down to. They don't want, these new financial firms, these new alternative financial platforms to compete for their bank deposits. Full stop. Like, that is literally the reason. That is the primary reason as to why Jamie Dimon is calling it BS. That is the reasons too that he gave were horrible, right? It was like, this is about consumer protection, and we don't believe that the consumer protection is strong enough right now on the bill. Like, I don't think you guys really care about consumer protection, right? I think this just comes down to an incumbent, right, which are the banks, reacting to a new player on the block, and they're trying to use the heavy hand of government to try to get their way. Like, I think that's what it fundamentally comes down to. I can't, and by the way, we've been saying this since like October, since the Clarity Act was going. And then when we found out that this was like the main stopping point as to why it was not getting across the finish line, we kept making the argument this has all to do with banks being worried that consumer deposits go to these new financial platforms. And I think that's a one-way door. I think that as people say, hey, listen, it takes an hour and a half to open a bank account. If I don't have a minimum amount deposited with the bank, they charge me a quote unquote monthly maintenance fee. The interest that they pay me is insulting, right? It's like 0.000 something percent. Like, it's laughable, right? And these alternative platforms, which is, by the way, the whole basis of free market and the whole basis of capitalism, right? It's supposed to, you're supposed to have this type of competition. The banks don't like that. They don't like that because they feel like they're going to lose their deposits. And guess what? The more they lose their deposits, the less they have the less ability they have to make money, because banks, what do they ultimately do? They make money off of your deposits. And if there's a new player on the block and basically saying, hey, listen, we're going to offer, 3% interest on your deposit instead of 0.0% interest on your deposit. And by the way, we're not going to charge you a monthly maintenance fee. And by the way, you're going to be able to send this stable coin anywhere around the world to whatever address. Like, think about the contrast, right? Like, think about your experiences on Zelle or your experiences sending a wire, right? Like, the wire transfers are so archaic, and there's this, for whatever reason, it costs $25 to send a wire. If you send that wire overseas, man, that thing could get lost in a black hole, right? There is no mempool that you can verify that the wire was sent. You call the bank, they can't tell you where it is, right? And this goes back to the Patriot Act, and this goes back to the Bank Secrecy Act, right? So clearly, there's a newer and there's a better system. And instead of competing with that newer and better system, they're using the heavy hand of government to try to stop that. Now, I don't think Senator Lummis would say that publicly, and I don't think Brian Armstrong would say that publicly, but they're not saying that publicly for political reasons because, again, they're trying to get this bill across the finish line. One of the other things that stuck out to me while Brian Armstrong was talking about it was how he emphasized the bipartisanship of this, right? Because the last thing we want to happen as an entire industry, by the way, and I've been saying this for over a year now since the election started, right? The last thing that we want to happen as an industry is if the political pendulum swings back in the United States, it happens all the time, right? Do we want to find ourselves in an Operation Choke Point 3.0 type of situation, right? And unfortunately, my opinion on this is I think one political party isn't truly representing the needs of Americans, because I truly believe that Bitcoin at its core and, you know, the broader crypto industry, even though I have a lot of disagreements with just crypto in general, right? I think Bitcoin is the only truly decentralized cryptocurrency. I don't think that they're properly representing the wants of the people. And I could make a very strong argument that them taking, and Elizabeth Warren campaigned on this. She's like, this is I'm going to campaign on an anti-crypto army. That was catastrophic. It literally, they lost the House, they lost the Senate, and they lost the executive branch. They lost the presidency. So like clearly that messaging didn't work, right? And then you can kind of go into the rabbit hole of like why that is, right? You guys know how I feel about this. I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm not changing my messaging on this whatsoever. I believe it's because they inherently want, not all of the Democratic Party wants this, but a subsect of the Democratic Party, specifically the Elizabeth Warren camp, and Elizabeth Warren is the head of the Senate Banking Committee. I think that they fundamentally want a central bank digital currency. And I think that if you have competition to a central bank digital currency, an alternative, a non-sovereign alternative, to use Larry Fink's words, I think that the adoption of that central bank digital currency, which is going to require the heavy hand of government, it's going to require some type of legal coercion for people to actually use it. If they had a choice between a deflationary currency that is censorship resistant versus a currency that is inflationary and is able to be censored by the government, I think people are naturally going to go and pick the deflationary / censorship resistant option if they had a choice, right? So I don't think it's a very popular thing to run on. However, I think that they're fighting like they're essentially fighting on their back foot, right? Because they can't run on this messaging. I think the last election clearly proved that, right? So I think what they're trying to do is that they're trying to stay quiet about it. I think that they're trying to scare the uninformed population, basically saying, oh my God, Iran is using Bitcoin. Like, dude, 2017 called and they want their excuses back, right? Like that isn't going to work anymore. And as time progresses, that political messaging is going to be less and less effective. Like, ladies and gentlemen, the legacy media isn't calling the shots anymore, right? Legacy media isn't crafting the narrative as much as they were 10 years ago. So trying to convince people that Bitcoin is boiling the oceans, or I remember from Chinese state media, there was this guy that literally said, like, if you adopt Bitcoin, we are literally all going to, pass away. Like, it was like so extreme. It's like their excuses are actually suffering from inflation themselves. But I do want to give the counter angle, which was very fascinating to me, which was given to me by Arthur Hayes when he came on Simply Bitcoin. And his argument was like, no, Nico, like it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that their poster boy, Sam Bankman-Fried, that was a huge donor, by the way, to the Republicans and the Democrats, but primarily the Democrats. He turned out to be a total fraud. So for them to kind of save face a little bit in the eyes of their voters, they took this Bitcoin / crypto stance. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. I agree with Arthur's argument, but simultaneously, I believe in my view as well, which is I think this has to do with their urge, their want to roll out a CBDC, just like the European Union is doing, and just like China is doing. I mean, that's a politician's wet dream. Like that's what they would want. They would want to happen. That's more control over society. That puts them in the power seat. That is the continuation of the fiat system on steroids. That's what central bank digital currencies fundamentally are, right? So again, very, very good answer from Brian Armstrong. Clearly, he's been media trained on this. And of course, amazing answer from Senator Lummis. And, you know, she's been doing this her entire political career. So I'm not surprised there in terms of her response. But at the same time, I think that this tells me that we're winning, right? Like if we're getting to a point where Jamie Dimon is going from, oh, Bitcoin is an index of money laundering, the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF gets approved regardless of that, becomes the most successful ETF in BlackRock's history. Then I think it was JP Morgan, right? Launched an ETF as well. Becomes the most successful.
No, it was Morgan Stanley.
Yeah, thank you. Morgan Stanley launched an ETF as well. Bitcoin happened to be the most successful ETF launch that they've ever had. You know, again, like it's like I don't think that this rhetoric, I don't think that name calling is going to work anymore. And I think that the guise of, oh, this is for consumer protection, you guys have no feet to stand on, right? Like if you want to talk about consumer protection, what the F happened in 2008? What the F happened in 2009? I mean, there was a whole movement that was born. It was Occupy Wall Street, right? You could say that Barack Obama basically got elected, you know, because of what happened in the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. And what was the outcome of that? What was the outcome of the 2008, 2009 financial crisis? No big banker went to jail. No big banker went to jail. No significant executive banker went to jail, even though what happened in 2008 was, I would say, the biggest crime that was committed to the lower and middle classes in the United States of America. The reason that you cannot own a home today was because of what happened in 2008, 2009, right? That was when the money printing experiment started. That's when Satoshi discovered or invented Bitcoin, depending on how you want to look at it. And since the money printing started, the Cantillon effect is taken on in full force. So what do I mean by that? Every time they print money, it's a wealth redistribution mechanism, and is one of the most sinister and evil ones, because it is wealth redistribution from the people that own assets, meaning the wealthy. Every time they print money, the value of those assets go up. And everybody who is living paycheck to paycheck, or everybody who's just saving in fiat, which happens to be the lower and middle classes, they get poorer. They get caught holding the bag. And that causes more and more wealth inequality. What happens when there's more and more wealth inequality? There's more political instability. So if you want to know why these last elections were absolutely crazy in terms of the assassination attempts, in terms of the name calling, in terms of using the legal apparatus to go after certain political opponents, it's because people in the United States are desperate right now. The wealth inequality, it's the highest it's ever been in a very, very long time. And they don't know the solution. People are turning to gambling. People are turning to drugs. They don't know how to get out of this. That is what's going on. That is fundamentally what's going on. And what you're seeing from the two parties is that they're doubling down on their own ideologies. What I think the two parties get wrong is fundamentally, how do you fix this? The fix is not, it doesn't require an election. It doesn't require for you to show up, even though I think it's important and you should vote in the midterms. But it doesn't require you as an individual to become politically active. All it requires is for you to opt out of that said corrupt system. All it requires is for you to take your energy and put it into something that is actually going to protect your purchasing power. And if enough of us do it, we will change the system from outside of the system, right? And that is the most important message that I can get to you guys today. Is the Clarity Act important? I think from a number go up perspective, 100%. I think from if you're running a Bitcoin business in the United States and you're a Bitcoin entrepreneur, I think it is important. Is it important for Bitcoin survival? No. Is the Bitcoin protocol going to continue moving on forward like nothing happened? 100%. We've been in worse situations before. Literally, the Chinese Communist Party banned Bitcoin mining within their borders at the top of the 2021 bull run. The hash rate dropped by 50%, and the hash rate recovered within 9 months without any type of politician, without any nation state, pushing for that. It was just Bitcoin's incentives alone, right? So again, going back, and I want to get Opti's thoughts, going back to Brian Armstrong's messaging and response, I think it was excellent. But the thing that stood out to me the most, Opti, and this is where I want to get your opinion, is why are the banks so concerned about the marketing aspect of the stable coins, right? Like, it's like, okay, idle deposits, we don't want that, but marketing, right? Like marketing, it's like basically like we actually don't want you to even tell people that there's an alternative to the current system, and that alternative could potentially be better, but we actually don't want you to market and tell that to people. Like, that is bat caca. That is bat caca. That is crazy to me, right? And if you want to, like, and I'll pull up the definition of cartel, right? Because I think it's very fitting here. A cartel is a group of independent businesses or countries that collaborate to limit competition, fix prices, and control supply in a market. Like, let me ask you guys something. What is this but not cartel-like behavior from the big banks? Not all of them. Some of them have converted. Some of them have realized, you know what? We can't fight this thing. Let's benefit from number go up technology. I think that they still.
Well, I mean, JP Morgan is one of them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But publicly, he's not.
There's a change, right? There's a change. There's definitely a change. But like going and using the heavy hand of government to get a certain outcome. Like, here's the definition. A cartel is a group of independent businesses that collaborate to limit competition, fix prices, and control supply in a market. So, like, what is that but not cartel-like behavior? And this reminds me of one of Andreas Antonopoulos' most famous speeches. It's many years old now. I think it's like a decade old now, but you could still find it on his YouTube channel. And it's a fantastic speech about how he calls the banks the biggest cartel in the world. And he has very good reasons that he lays out. And I think that they're showing their colors. I think that the cartels are scared. I think that the cartels are revealing. And I think that the cartels don't have good excuses. So what are they doing? They're resorting to the last thing that they can do, which is character assassination and is name calling, like little children in a kindergarten, right? This is like they can't counter the argument, which is why Brian Armstrong is taking the high road. So they're resorting to name calling and fear mongering, both saying, listen, if this gets passed, consumers will get hurt. Also, this is complete and utter BS. And I mean, that tells me that we're winning. That tells me that we're making progress. That tells me that that's one step in the right direction, right? Now, I think the question on everybody's minds is, despite all of this pressure from Coinbase, from Scott Bessent, from the Trump administration, from Senator Lummis, there's still, I haven't checked the latest odds on the Clarity Act, but there's still only a 50% chance that the Clarity Act gets signed into law. And what should that tell you? What should that tell you? That should tell you that the amount of influence that the big banks have over politics is absurd. And it also should tell you, which is even more worrying, that politics in general is not really representative of the wants and the needs of the American people. which I think is even more worrying, right? And we covered this topic specifically when the Iran conflict started. I got so upset. And the reason I got so upset, and I love President Trump, and I love what he's done for Bitcoin, and I love the fact that he freed Ross Ulbricht. I love that he wants to make the United States the Bitcoin capital of the world. But simultaneously, he ran on no more wars in the Middle East. That was his promise. And I think that what happens when you break those campaign promises, what it does is it burns political capital from the things that you're actually trying to get accomplished. Because people don't take you seriously anymore. That's the problem, right? So if it wasn't for the redistricting efforts by the Republican Party, I would have told you that they're going to get smoked in the House this November. And that would be very bad for Bitcoin and the crypto industry in the US. It would be very bad because we just go back in time to where we were from a regulatory standpoint. Now, one last bit, because I've been on my soapbox for a while. Does that matter? I would say no. And the reason I say no is because we haven't had a bull run during Trump's administration. He promised us at Bitcoin 2024, that he was going to send Bitcoin to the moon. Right now, Bitcoin has gone higher on a percentage basis during the Biden administration, during Operation Choke Point 2.0, than it's appreciated during the Trump administration. I mean, that's pretty effing crazy, right? So does the Bitcoin protocol need this? Absolutely not. Do Bitcoin businesses need this in the United States? Perhaps. Is this bullish from a number go up perspective? I think absolutely, because I think different pools of capital that haven't tapped into Bitcoin because of regulatory uncertainty are now looking at, with the Clarity Act passing, they're now looking at Bitcoin saying, okay, listen, I know that if my business gets involved in the Bitcoin industry somehow, I know that there isn't any type of regulatory liability that could pop up 2 to 3 years from now, right? So anyhow, it's a great update. I want to get your thoughts, Opti, specifically on the marketing bit, because that stuck out to me the most. And again, Brian Armstrong, media trained, he specifically dropped those bits on purpose because he's trying to send you a message to how absurd the other side's arguments are. Like, look at all the things we've conceded. We've even conceded on marketing, right? Like, what's the holdup here?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, my initial reaction was just that it truly was like a political answer. And honestly, maybe it's because I dislike Brian Armstrong, or maybe not him as a person, but just what Coinbase kind of means for a long-term Bitcoiner, that when I initially heard this, I'm like, yo, Brian Armstrong's like completely bending the knee here. He's like, we've conceded on all the points. We gave the banks everything they wanted, and yet I'm still getting attacked. And you're asking me, why do I think this is? Well, it's obviously that whole deposit thing. Like, the main point is exactly what this is all about. And the numbers that I've seen of how much money the banks will lose because of stablecoin deposits is somewhere, it's a huge range, but the lower estimate is $500 billion, and the higher estimate is $6 trillion that the big banks will lose out if stable coins do proliferate. I think it was by 2028. So this is why we're seeing Jamie Dimon crash out. This isn't the whole, I do like that they both, well, actually, I don't actually like it, but I did notice that they both essentially said the same thing. The clip we saw last week of Jamie Dimon and what Brian Armstrong said this morning, or what we heard him say this morning, they both did say something pretty similar. On the Fox News Jamie Dimon clip, it was always positioned in this way that, oh, Brian Armstrong or Coinbase is out here saying they're fighting for the American people, that they're doing this for the industry. And that's when Jamie Dimon's like, no, he's, full of BS. Like, that's a crock of a hot, stinking load that Brian Armstrong is saying. What did Brian Armstrong say in this clip? He's like, look, let's not talk about like him, saying bad names about me. I think this is going to benefit everyone else. And I think that is the political framing here. Obviously, I think where we stand as an industry right now, I think Jamie Dimon's words probably hold a lot more weight than Brian Armstrong's. I mean, look at all of us Bitcoiners. We're not the biggest fan of Coinbase at all. So I think, but in the grand scheme of things, what Jamie Dimon says probably is the prevailing view of the industry, because most people aren't obsessed with Bitcoin like we are. Most people don't know that JP Morgan is the authorized participant to the Bitcoin ETF. They don't know that JP Morgan is basically the authorized participant for a lot of the Bitcoin ETFs. They probably don't know that JP Morgan wants to use Bitcoin as collateral. All they probably hear are these little sound bites by Jamie Dimon saying like, oh, this is going to be super bad for us. You know, what's the other things that Elizabeth Warren and all them have been saying? The whole Bitcoin is going to destroy the traditional financial system if more people use it. And I've always laughed at that. I'm like, how are they going to blame us for their problems? This is the classic scapegoat. But you did bring up Cynthia Lummis, and I don't know if you guys have been seeing her on Twitter, but she's been going on a tirade for the last couple of days. It seems like almost every tweet she's done has been about the Clarity Act. She's just maybe this is her PR, you know, just to make sure it's still in people's minds and that they're seeing this. I don't want to read them all, but I will pull them up, and she keeps saying the same thing. If we don't pass the Clarity Act, America is losing out. So this was June 5th. Later on in June 5th, she said the same thing, you know, protecting developers and Bitcoiners and founders. The next day, we got another one. Basically, I think she might just be getting frustrated because of what Jamie Dimon's been doing and the pushback.
I mean, she said it herself. She said that this was the most difficult bill in her entire career to get over the finish line.
And she's been going super hard on Twitter about it.
I think that should tell you everything you need to know, because I always say this, like, Bitcoin exposes incentives. It really does. Like once you apply that logic to a lot of people, to a lot of things, nation states, whatever, it exposes incentives. And the thing that's getting exposed to me the most, and the thing that's the most worrying to me as a first-generation American, is, do we really have a country that is by the people for the people? My counter to that is, I don't think so. I think you have an unelected bureaucracy that remains in power in Washington, D.C., no matter who you elect into office. And that unelected bureaucracy is funded by the money printer. I think that as long as the money printer is a way for the government to continue to pay for themselves, I think from an architectural perspective, I think it's impossible for you to ever have a government by the people for the people, because the incentives are misaligned. And when you're hearing Senator Lummis basically, this is the most difficult bill I've ever tried to get across the finish line, that's not surprising to me at all. Because what's at stake here? At stake here is literally a pivotal shift on how the country has been run for the longest time. It's literally taking away power from the big banks. Now, is it how us Bitcoiners want it or how we envisioned it? Absolutely not. Because if it wasn't for this interest or rewards language in the bill, I don't think the big banks would have put up the fight that they're putting up.
They didn't on the Genius Act.
Well, I mean, the Genius Act is super fast because it's just a perpetuation of the U.S. dollar, right? Like,
and yet we're still fighting over stablecoins.
It's basically perpetuating the U.S. dollar internationally. And if you perpetuate the U.S. dollar internationally even more, if more people are getting access to dollars on an international basis, I think that fundamentally allows the U.S. government to print more money. So does it surprise me at all that got passed super quickly? No, not at all. But at the same time, here's the thing about stablecoins, and here's why I'm not as against them as some other Bitcoiners. Are stablecoins decentralized? I mean, they can be frozen. Like, if you have a stablecoin account, it can be frozen, right? So if it can be frozen, I think they're definitely not as decentralized as Bitcoin. Are they more decentralized than the current banking system? 100%. Is the barrier to entry significantly lower for someone living in a country, that again, you don't have the ability to open a bank account? 100%. As a first generation American whose family came from Venezuela, I think stable coins have been a godsend to people in Venezuela. And I think most importantly, they are a stepping stone into Bitcoin because they get people comfortable with digital wallets. And eventually, those people that are using those digital wallets are going to come to the same conclusion that we've come to in the West, which is if you're going from the Bolivar to the dollar, it's a godsend. You're like, oh my God, I have a stable currency. But eventually, you're going to come to the realization, you're saying, wait a second. Yes, this is 100% more stable than the Bolivar, 100%, without a doubt. But I'm still losing my purchasing power on a yearly basis. And where does that road lead to? The road leads to Bitcoin. So I would say that that they have been a net positive, in my opinion, for the world, and that they're a stepping stone into Bitcoin. That's my opinion. Now, the reason the Genius Act got passed, as you were saying, Opti, is because, again, it perpetuates the use of the US dollar worldwide. Now, the reason the Clarity Act isn't getting passed is because the big banks, which clearly have a tremendous amount of influence in Washington, D.C., are scared to death that their business model is under threat by a new incumbent. And instead of competing in the free market and saying, okay, we have to elevate our product, we have to pivot, they're using cartel-like behavior and saying, nah, actually, we're not going to change. And you know what? Going back to Elizabeth Warren's entire platform is to protect people from the big banks. Her entire platform is to protect big people from, big businesses. That's her whole shtick, right? What is she doing here than not allying with Jamie Dimon and protecting literally one of the world's largest banks? Isn't that ironic? Isn't that Bitcoin exposing incentives? Like I said, Bitcoin is exposing the incentives. So again, shout out to Brian Armstrong for that excellent answer, not taking the bait, not replying to the name calling, not getting into a mudslinging contest, just laying out the facts, staying very stoic. Very, very good answer on his end. I think if he answered any other way, they would have used that as political ammunition to go against the Clarity Act. And also, not surprising here, masterclass answer from Senator Lummis when she answered it, when she said she did a two-pronged approach. She was like, well, he could be misleading people, but I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. He probably just hasn't read the bill. You guys know where we stand in terms of what I think Jamie Dimon is doing. Opti?
Yeah. But I do want to shift this a little bit because we do have a update on the Clarity Act. No date yet for when this is going to get voted through. As we've been covering for a while, they are still saying July 4th is the date that's when we'll get it through. But we still don't even have a day for this vote to even happen. So, as of now, it's still up in the air. They're still hoping July. But Eleanor Terrett, my favorite journalist on this, is still on the beat. So here is probably the latest update that we will probably get some more news about the Clarity Act, at least where it currently stands. I would say probably by Thursday, because there is a meeting tomorrow. And I find this meeting, at least the people involved with this meeting, is going to be very interesting. So Eleanor Terrett goes, news, administration officials will host a law enforcement group at the White House tomorrow, Wednesday, as part of ongoing efforts to address concerns that certain provisions in the Clarity Act, including developer protections derived from the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, could make it harder to combat illicit finance, according to three sources familiar with the meetings. The issue, along with ethics, remains one of the major sticking points that must be resolved before lawmakers can bring the bill to the Senate floor. Several Democrats have signaled they will not support the legislation unless law enforcement believes its concerns have been adequately addressed. The meeting comes on the heel of a broader industry push to win support for the bill from lawmakers and law enforcement, including a town hall and a fly-in feature, former law enforcement officials now working in crypto. So that's what we're going to see tomorrow. But I think at this point, it might be fitting to read Senator Lummis's tweet this morning. She goes, American builders should not have to move to Singapore or Switzerland to know what the rules are. The Clarity Act fixes this. And hence, one of the big things that we were talking about when the Clarity Act markup bill happened was the developer protections. It looks like tomorrow they're going to have a broader conversation about this. We'll see where we stand. I would say probably by Thursday, maybe something will come out of that meeting. But now it's still up in the air. We have no idea. There's no date for it to actually go through. They're hopeful July 4th, but might not happen in July. Okay. I've heard other kind of expectations that maybe they will vote on it in mid-July. And that is, past the Scott Bessent date of July 4th, the President Trump date of July 4th to pass the Clarity Act. So we'll see what happens. But I think at this point, let's just keep it moving, Nico.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, we have a fantastic show for you guys. We have a clip of Checkmatey from shout out to Marty Bent from the TFTC podcast. And I think he's talking about the Bitcoin bottom, which should be interesting. So I'm excited to play that clip for you guys. And then we do have a fantastic post by Commissioner Hester Pierce talking about protecting open source developers. She specifically says, this is super strong, publishing code is speech, which the First Amendment protects, right? So I've always told you guys, elections have consequences. This is the type of stuff that happens, but this is fantastic. This is incredible news. And so we're going to talk about all of that, ladies and gentlemen, and more. You guys are going to want to stay tuned. We have tons to cover on today's Simply Bitcoin Live. We're going to be right back just after the quick break.
Here's the part that nobody says out loud. Buying Bitcoin on an exchange and leaving it there isn't buying Bitcoin. It's buying an IOU. And the last decade has been a masterclass in what happens when those exchanges don't deliver on their promises.
Bitcoin Well is a self-custody Bitcoin platform. That means that when you buy Bitcoin, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet. You actually own it from the very first transaction. They're available both in the United States and Canada. Pricing is transparent, straightforward, and no nonsense. And if you're buying a larger amount of Bitcoin, Bitcoin Well Infinite gives you concierge-level support through a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, premium help for when it actually matters.
You can also stack a little extra through the referral and wishing well rewards. A nice bonus on top of the owning your own Bitcoin thing. So go to bitcoinwell.com/simply and sign up for the Bitcoin Well portal today and buy Bitcoin you actually own.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Stampseed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed phrases really secure? Stampseed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need for you to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of just writing them down on paper. Paper is fragile. Titanium plates are strong. Your words are actually stamped into the titanium plate with this hammer and these letter stamping tools. Once the words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They're also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and time-proof. And now you can customize your titanium seed plates. You can upload your design or logo, and they will laser engrave it on the back of your seed plate, the opposite side of where the words are. Stamp your seed on Stampseed and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the stampseed.com store. All right, everybody, we are back. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $61,750. Block height is 952,995. Market cap is 1.24 trillion. It's tiny. The SpaceX IPO is going to IPO at a higher market cap of Bitcoin. That is nuts. Bitcoin versus gold market cap. We got to 10%, ladies and gentlemen. Now it's only at 4%. If Bitcoin reaches the market cap of gold, that would put the price of Bitcoin at $1.5 million per coin. Excuse me. Decline from all-time high, 51%. Oof. If you're buying Bitcoin right now, you're getting it at a 50% discount. Anyways, I told you guys I had a clip from Checkmate. I don't know if we'll play the entire thing, but he went on the TFTC podcast. Shout out Marty Bent and the TFTC team. They make incredible content. Highly recommend their channel. Go check it out. But here is the quote. Everyone always assumes that alligator jaws close by Bitcoin going down. No. They close because Bitcoin's forgotten. Then suddenly it's the only thing in the room that's moving. Let me play the clip and then we'll talk about it.
There's no question that the AI trade is just like you can feel it. It's like a vacuum that's just sucking up absolutely everything. Now there's some parts of it that have a lot of merit. There's bottlenecks left, right, and center. You could argue that there may not be certain bubbles, but then once you get these IPOs go live, I mean, I've read a bunch of pieces on the SpaceX IPO. And I mean, guys, the numbers are so far off making sense. Like, and I'm no equity analyst, right? I'm not going to pretend to be an equity analyst. I couldn't tell you left from right, but I can smell test things, and I've kind of seen this stuff enough. I'm like, the numbers are just out of control. It makes no sense. So, and they're changing rules for the S&P to stuff this thing in because they don't have the buyers for it. So everything's going to get sold. But let's go back to the Bitcoin piece. Let's imagine, right, that we have this IPO moment, go back through history. Generally speaking, there's like a hero IPO, and that's like the genesis point of the beginning of the end of the bubble, because like suddenly the euphoria just goes. And in this scenario, where is Bitcoin going to be? It's going to be the most under-owned, forgotten asset of all time. People are like, oh, but when the bubble finally cracks, Bitcoin's going to get taken down to zero. It's like, dude, no one's going to own it. He's going to sell it at that point in time. Like, that's what the time pain process does. It removes anybody who's sitting there going, like for me, I'm not rotating my Bitcoin profits into AI. Sure. Would it be a good decision? Yes. But there's also like, I don't buy Bitcoin for the swing trades. I buy it for, and whenever I do buy, it's that long-term investment, right? I buy it for it's my longest duration asset. I've got play money that I stick in all sorts of stuff. But for my long-term duration, I don't trade my gold. I don't trade my Bitcoin. They're my long-term savings. So at some point in time, we've got a massive alligator jaws. They close. And everyone always assumes they're going to close by Bitcoin going down and stocks going down as well. It's like, no, they're going to close because Bitcoin's forgotten. And then suddenly it's going to be the only thing in the room that's moving. And what happens to all the fast money? So like the market is cyclical. We're going through this rotation. And I would actually say something I've observed, and I kind of had this idea as a theme. I do think this like idea of capital rotation, it feels like something that I know it's always been a factor, but even if you think about it from like the microcosm of the Bitcoin crypto world, it used to be like a rising tide lifts all boats. And that used to be the same for the stock market too. A rising tide would lift all boats. But now we've been in this like, oh, this sector's getting crushed, but these ones are doing well. AI is doing well, but this sector's getting crushed. It's a lot more of like a stock pickers market. And I do think that's more or less going to stay the same, but it kind of feels like, how do I describe this? In terms of like the energy of the market, it feels like the ponzification of everything, like real late stage fiat stuff where everyone has become the fast money. Like everyone is the fast money now. The system incentivizes people to chase the hottest thing all the time and forever. And that's why you're almost getting this like, almost like a resonance rather than like being this like stable pool of capital. It's invested in everything and then a ball of hot money. The ball is the majority. And then there's like less and less of that fundamental capital because there's career risk. Oh, why didn't you own all these AI names? And then everyone just piles in. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, but I can't imagine that Bitcoin's going to be a heavily owned, heavily forced sale asset when it's all said and done because we're in the process of flushing them out as we speak. That is what this process is. Time pain. There's going to be no one left who, like everyone who's in the trench at the end of this process is going to be people like you and I. And who do I want to be in the trenches with at the arse end of a bear market? You know, good stuff.
Absolute bars from Checkmate. Guys, if you want to see the entire podcast, go check out the TFTC channel. Shout out Marty Bent, crushing it like always. And Checkmate, I mean, what a great take. I want to focus on two things, Opti, and then
Gotta love Aussies.
I want to get your opinion on this. So take number one is, I think the thing that stuck out to me the most, and I think this is the most the concept about Bitcoin bear markets that people have the biggest misconception on, is, and I'll quote this from what Checkmate was saying. Everyone always assumes the alligator jaws close by Bitcoin going down. No, they close because Bitcoin's forgotten. And this is the part that I want you guys to focus on, because this has been the reoccurring theme that we've seen over the last 6 months. In fact, this phenomenon happens every single Bitcoin bear market. And I would say this Bitcoin bear market, I would say, is more similar to the 2013, 2014 bear market than it was to the 2022 bear market in terms of vibes, right? And I'm a vibes guy. Why do I say that? The 2013, 2014 bear market, that huge explosion happened because of Mt. Gox. People literally thought Bitcoin was dead. It was over. And what did that lead up to? If you would have bought Bitcoin at the bottom of that bear market, you would have ran it up from $300, $400, $500 a coin, all the way up to $20,000 when we peaked. Even when Bitcoin corrected back down to 3,500, you would have still 10x'd your investment from the bottom of the 2013, 2014, 2015 bear market. You would have 10x'd it from $300 to $3,500, right? I'm getting those types of vibes this bear market. Why? Because people are paying attention to other shiny new things. They're talking about the SpaceX IPO. They're talking about AI. Hey, listen, if I invest in these AI stonks, I'm going to get a better return. Like this is what you're hearing, right? This is the most opportune moment, right? This is like the worst of the worst. This is when you're in the, as Checkmate said, this is when you're in the trenches with your friends and there's no one else around. There's no more tourists. There's no more people that just came up for number go up. There's no more people that came for speculation. The only people, I would say, the only idiots that are left are the hardcore Bitcoin believers. And historically speaking, they are the ones that get rewarded the most. They're the ones that get vindicated the most when the bull market inevitably comes back. So well put by Checkmate. I completely agree with everything that he's saying. Now's the time to double tap. Now's the time to double down. Now's the time to grow your conviction, because ultimately, guys, Bitcoin's down 50% from an all-time high, right? And everybody loves Bitcoin. Everybody is paying attention to Bitcoin. But that's when Bitcoin's making all-time highs. No one is paying to Bitcoin when Bitcoin is 50% down. And that's because people have been disillusioned by it. That's because people are forgetting about it. And that creates an opportunity for the believers, for the Bitcoiners that are just unreasonably bullish, like Opti, like myself, to get yourself.
Damn, you just called me an idiot. That's crazy.
I didn't call you an idiot. But like, think about it. Like the reason I used the word idiot was on purpose. Like,
I know I'm trolling, dude. I
like,
you don't need to rationalize.
We were kind of idiots like in 2018. Like that was like,
dude, I'm an idiot today. I don't know what we're talking about.
Like
what are we talking about?
Like 2018 really required some cojones, bro. Like it really,
no, it didn't, because I was an idiot. So it was like Dunning-Kruger effect.
It really required some like some crazy type of conviction that like is on the border of straight up delusion.
No, it was just straight up desperation. All right. I just needed it to work, and I didn't care if it didn't work at that point. But anyway, I do want to chat about this because, like, you guys know, we do the daily show. It's been a rough year and a half, you know. Well, actually, yeah, a year and a half, almost 2 at this point. You know, we're basically back at, I think, like October 2024 prices or something like that. We've gone sideways for 2 years. And in the last drop, I would say in February, around 60K, you could definitely start to feel the vibe shifts. And in the months since then, since we hit that 60K, and obviously since we kind of went back down the last couple of days, and it's been pretty brutal right now, you can definitely start to feel like I don't want to say the peak fear of a bear market, because who knows? You know, I'm more convinced that we are farther along in the bear market than, say, Nico is. But I think the mentality is still the same. You know, even if we have until October, like you're feeling the pain here. Everyone's feeling the pain. Hold on one second, Nico. And what I have seen is you guys in the chat are the hardcore Bitcoiners basically saying, actually, I think it was me and Senior Gringo Poppy in the chat earlier. It's like, dude, I've been in Bitcoin for, you know, multiple cycles. He was saying 2016, me 2017, and we're both bored. Even one of the most bullish persons in the chat, Ron, my boy, he's like the last couple of weeks, like, I am bored. Like, it's getting bearish. This is getting painful. Like, when are we going back up? It's never a conversation about us selling our Bitcoin because, like, you know, James said, you know, Checkmate, he said, this is our long-term investment. We have a long-term view of this. But what we are seeing is there's no one left in the market except for us. We're the only ones here. And even we are getting bored, and maybe even further getting demoralized because of what we've seen in gold last year, what we're seeing in AI stocks right now. We are seeing that capital rotate into other things. Maybe it's not the entire Bitcoin market, but again, as I've said in the past, when we got the ETFs, when we got the institutions here, we got a new, quote, kind of investor. And they are, to some respects, looking at everything else happening in TradFi, and they're like, dude, I thought Bitcoin was going to be a home run. I thought I could put 1% in and I would get, you know, 50, 100% returns on this. In fact, I'm down, like negative 30% the last year that I've been holding. And then AI's been freaking pumping, whether it's NVIDIA, Micron, Intel. They're like getting 100% gains plus. And now everyone is chasing the SpaceX IPO, and it has a $1.8 trillion IPO valuation, like the biggest IPO valuation ever. And they're like, F it, we're going to buy the top at this point. Like, I don't even care because Bitcoin's so bad. It's so boring. Like, this is peak bear market vibes. And I completely agree with James. It's like, when things do finally crack, I don't think Bitcoin's going to go any lower because there's no one here but us who's going to sell Bitcoin. Like, we're the only ones that want it.
I'll push back on a part of your bit, right? Which is the part where you're like, you disagree where we are in the bear market. So what I would say to that is, like, right now we are in the last inning of it, right? Then we kind of agree. I was saying what you said yesterday, like only 40% through the bear market. I'm like, no, we're way closer to the end than the middle. We are, I would say, the last inning of the bear market, which, by the way, happens to be the most painful. But this is the signs that you want to see, because I didn't see these signs in the 2022, 2023 bear market. The 2022 and 2023 bear market, the Bitcoiners, the Triarii, the last line of defense, were like, yo, when the price picks up, this thing's gonna absolutely melt faces. And we all knew that in 2022 and 2023. Were we down like 100%? Were we down like 70%? 100%. Was it like, kind of depressing? 100%. but we all had that like crazy conviction that when this thing got picked up again, it was going to rip to the moon. This time, I'm not
never ripped.
This time, I'm not seeing that same type of conviction.
Because we never ripped.
I'm seeing people getting disillusioned completely, right? Like there's uncertainty that Bitcoin can reach the 500K region. There's uncertainty. And if you want to learn lessons of the past, you have to look at the past. And history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And this is why I bring up the 2014 bear market. This is why I bring it up, because that bear market, from what I heard, this was before my time, was absolutely brutal. But from an opportunity perspective, hindsight's 2020, it happened to be the most opportune time to start stacking sats. And I think we have a very, very similar setup in this type of situation, because even the big capital, they're paying attention to other things. They're saying, oh, it's just this Bitcoin thing, it tapped out. It's only had a 12% CAGR over the last 5 years. Like, I'd rather put my capital elsewhere. There's better returns. I think that right now is, and I've been right more often than I've been wrong. And I'm gonna mention this in a couple of years, right, Opti? I'm getting those vibes. I'm getting those vibes this bear market. It's a combination of boredom, disillusionment, and capitulation. And I think last time we got capitulation and boredom, but we didn't get disillusionment, right? And I think the reason that we got disillusionment this time is because we didn't have a classic euphoric blow off top. So I think last time, when was the last time that we truly got some type of crazy run up? Ladies and gentlemen, that was 2021. 2021. And when was the last time you had a classic euphoric blow off top in Bitcoin? 2017. That was 9 years ago.
Dude, quit depressing me.
9 years ago. So I think people have forgotten what Bitcoin is capable of. But that's your opportunity. That is when conviction gets tested. We're back in the trenches, Opti. We thought we got out of the trenches. We're back in the trenches,
dude.
Brother.
I thought I was out the hood, but I'm back in the trenches.
All right, everybody. We're going to continue the show. Amazing news coming out of Hester Pierce. She had a historical announcement. We're going to read it for you guys. Coming out of the SEC, elections have consequences. And then we're going to wrap up the show. We're going to be right back in just a little bit. I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin. Here's something most Bitcoin holders never figure out until it's too late. You're sitting on wealth you can't touch without selling. Ledin fixes that. Bitcoin-backed loans. You keep your stack, you get cash. And they just introduced their lowest rates ever. No complexity, no fine print. The larger the loan, the lower the rate. These new rates apply to all new loans, refinances, and renewals. You'll see all the rates up front before you apply. The new, lower rates come with Ledin's gold standard protection. Your Bitcoin remains custodied and is never lent out for interest. Perfect 8-year track record of keeping clients' assets safe. Auto top-ups, LTV alerts, and partial repayments to keep you in control. Repay whenever you want with zero penalties or monthly payments. Ledin's perfect $10 billion track record through every market cycle in the last 8 years speaks for itself. Don't choose between a great rate and the safety of your Bitcoin. Get both at Ledin. If you ever thought, what happens to my Bitcoin if something happens to me? Or what happens if I lose my phone? You're not alone. For a lot of people, the biggest barrier to self-custody isn't buying Bitcoin. It's the fear of making a mistake. And that's why I like BitKey, and I recommend it to my friends and family. BitKey is a Bitcoin wallet built for real life, not just for day one, but for everything that happens in between. Lost devices, upgrades, accidents, and long-term ownership. There's no seed phrase to write down and worry about losing, and no single point of failure that can lock you out of your Bitcoin forever. What really stands out about BitKey is the peace of mind. Recovery is built in. Inheritance is built in. It's a complete self-custody system built by the team behind Square and Cash App, designed to make holding your own Bitcoin simpler and safer. Take self-custody of your Bitcoin today using BitKey. Go to bitkey.world and use promo code SIMPLY for 10% off your new BitKey. That's bitkey.world, promo code SIMPLY. All right, everybody. Massive news coming out of the SEC. This was published on June 2nd, 2026. I do want to bring up Niraj, I hope I pronounced that correctly, he's communications for Coin Center. Coin Center is a huge kind of like lobbying arm for the entire crypto space in DC. And he pointed this out, right? So Commissioner Hester Pierce lists code is speech as the first principle guiding her thinking. I want to pull up the actual announcement.
Don't read the whole thing. Just go to the bullet points.
Yeah,
it's too big. There you go. That part.
Here. So some basic principle guide my thinking as I seek to apply securities regulation where it belongs and keep it away from activities that are not properly within our mandate. Point number one, publishing code is speech. This is massive, right? Because essentially the whole case against Samurai is based on the fact that they wrote open source software, and that open source software was used by entities that were sanctioned by the United States. So again, like, this is something that we cannot capitulate on. Like, talking about the Clarity Act, I know it's not popular with Bitcoiners. This type of language is included in the Clarity Act specifically so this type of thing doesn't happen in the future. You know what else is open? This is where I think it was going, by the way. You know what else is open source software? It's Bitcoin. So I think they would have started with the privacy tools, and I think that they would have set precedents with that. And then eventually they would have said, oh, hey, Iran is sanctioned by the United States, and Iran is using Bitcoin to facilitate payments. So if you're a Bitcoin open source developer, are you enabling the facilitative payments to Iran because it's a sanctioned country? That's the slippery slope, right? And I think that's the political game that they were playing, right? Because they didn't start with Samurai. That was quite popular. They started with something that was no one's ever heard of. It was Tornado Cash. When they got the Tornado Cash case through and Coin Center actually sued and said, hey, like, this is against the First Amendment, blah, 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 blah. And then that got essentially shut down by the judge. Within a month, they went after the Samurai wallet developers. So they were essentially setting precedents to say, hey, listen, doesn't matter if you're writing open source code that is free speech, that is protected by the First Amendment. You're enabling criminals because you're writing software. Like, that's the case that they were making, essentially. So this is massive that we have a commissioner of the SEC. Their first guiding principle is, quote, her words, not mine, publishing code is speech, which the First Amendment protects. People who do nothing more than write open source code for other people to use should not have to register with the SEC. As Coin Center has explained, software, including software that can be used to, quote, facilitate activities that were historically intermediated, is protected speech, as is, quote, publishing new versions of software, recommending updates, and attempting to persuade users to adopt improved or modified tools. This is a very big deal. Let me explain to you why. A lot of the power that governments have over the control of money is because they control the intermediaries, right? So if I send a payment to Opti, right, and if I do it through one of the popular payment platforms here in the United States, what's happening is essentially my bank is essentially sending it to Opti's bank. Sometimes it gets routed through another bank, right? My bank is technically holding money on my behalf, but technically that's an IOU, right? Governments put a tremendous amount of regulation and they have a tremendous amount of control over these banks, over these quote unquote intermediaries. This is where Bitcoin kind of reshuffles everything. Because if I hypothetically had Bitcoin, I could send it to Opti's self-custody wallet directly. Now, all of a sudden, it's peer-to-peer. The inconvenient fact and the inconvenient thing for regulators and for people who control or who want to continue to control the flows of money is that their whole control apparatus has been built around intermediaries. They didn't even take into account that there was going to be peer-to-peer capability, especially on a digital scale. There was always going to be that peer-to-peer cash transaction capability. This is why they're trying to get rid of cash in the European Union, by the way. But they never conceived of the idea that there was going to be a protocol, a technology designed that was going to allow massive amounts of capital to be sent peer-to-peer. This is why she's very specific with her wording. And this is why it's so important to pay attention to this type of stuff, even though it might bore some of you guys, because this is the front line, ladies and gentlemen. I guarantee you that if we would have kept going down the Samurai wallet route, I guarantee you, and guarantee is a strong word, but I guarantee you, eventually they would have used the argument of, hey, Iran just took payment in Bitcoin. North Korea just took payment in Bitcoin. Are you a Bitcoin software developer? You're enabling those transactions. There's a reason Satoshi disappeared, ladies and gentlemen. There's a reason he just disappeared into the ether, right? There's a reason for that. So this is so important. I know it's buried in a government document and stuff like this, but this is so important because, again, you have a government official, tremendous amount of power, saying publishing code is speech, which the First Amendment protects. And then she specifically mentions how this could be weaponized, essentially. People who do nothing more than write code, open source code for other people to use should not have to register with a government agency. As Coin Center has explained, software, including software that can be used to facilitate activities that were historically intermediated, is protected speech. Just because it's inconvenient that those intermediaries are not there anymore doesn't mean that it's not protected speech. And, quote, publishing new versions of software, recommending updates, and attempting to persuade others to adopt improved or modified tools. Now it goes on to say, blockchains are general purpose technology. Just as the internet is used for a lot of purposes, blockchains are too. We need to limit our regulation to activities that are within our remit. The SEC is not a general purpose infrastructure regulator. This is what the SEC was being utilized under the previous administration. It was regulation by, what was it? Is regulation by
enforcement.
Regulation by enforcement. This is not in the SEC's domain, but the government still used the SEC as a weapon to go after technologies that disintermediated intermediaries. Blockchains work as intended when legal systems respect base layer neutrality. Goes on to say, quote, blockchain networks derive much of their utility from their ability to process transactions without prejudice. Goes on to say, quote, recognizing legally credible neutrality, therefore, is not just about avoiding overregulation. It's about preserving the core characteristics that make these services valuable in the first place. Duh. Right? What happens if they try to co-opt Bitcoin and they try to make Bitcoin basically an extension of the current financial system? Bitcoin doesn't really solve anything. This is why taking self-custody of your Bitcoin, running your own node, transacting peer-to-peer is so incredibly important. Goes on to say, if infrastructure providers do nothing more than impartially process data in accordance with verifiable, open, and discretionary execution logic, the SEC should not treat them as securities market participants. Regulatory framework should govern conduct, not proximity to the conduct. Neutral conduits for the processing of data lack the foundational rationale for regulatory intervention. An infrastructure provider that processes securities-related data is no more a securities market participant than a telephone company that carries a conversation about stock tips is a broker-dealer. The subject matter of the data cannot determine regulatory status of the entity it's processing. Technology can sometimes stand in for regulation. The power of a decentralized blockchain is that, quote, every participant follows the same program rules with no exceptions for powerful actors or special circumstances, including for the developers of these protocols. Decentralization of technology and governance means that, quote, no single party can change the rules arbitrarily or discriminate against users. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think this is about? Why do you think this wording is coming out? Why do you think this is being described? Right? And do you think it's a coincidence, again, that the first part says publishing code is speech when the First Amendment, which the First Amendment protects? Of course, it's not a coincidence. This is a message. This is a clear message that's being sent, right? Because there are actors that don't want peer-to-peer technologies. And this isn't just Bitcoin. This includes information, by the way. This includes data. They would rather want a control system where they control the flows of information and they control the flows of money. Next point. When centralized actors in crypto markets have discretion over or otherwise take custody of other people's security and funds, securities regulation may be appropriate. On-chain CeFi, in contrast to true DeFi, is fair game for securities regulation, but that regulation may not be identical to regulation of traditional centralized finance. People should be free to transact without intermediaries. Very, very strong point, right? It's very clear where this is going. It's very clear what the stance is. Section 11A of the SEC Act recognizes the value of investors being able to execute their orders, quote, without the participation of a dealer. And we should welcome decentralizing technologies that make this possible. Intermediaries can rest assured that most investors will prefer the immediate route, but the DIY option is important. The securities law should not reach transparent, non-custodial software tools that enable users to interact with autonomous blockchain networks and smart contract protocols to engage in transactions on their own. The last point, the fact that multiple people use the same software code to transact in securities does not by itself mean somebody has to register as an exchange. If nobody is in control of the system, who would register? Again, poking holes in a lot of the flawed logic that was used to go after our industry during the previous administration. Guys, at the end of the day, Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer technology. The argument that they're trying to brute force into this conversation is that somehow the world is going to burn down without intermediaries. That's the argument they're trying to make. But the inconvenient fact is that that is how the world has operated throughout most of human history. That's how people transacted. It wasn't through intermediaries. And I'm sorry that the whole control system apparatus was built around the idea of co-opting the intermediaries in order for those intermediaries to basically act as an arm of the government. It's inconvenient. I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, this is the United States of America. We are protected by the First Amendment, and you cannot convince me. You can't look at me dead in the eye and say somehow it is dangerous to our society that I have the ability to transact with anyone around the world peer to peer without having to ask the government for permission. I'm sorry. I don't buy that crock of dog caca. Doesn't fly with me. I don't buy that argument. It's full of caca. That's what I believe. I believe what this fundamentally comes down to is they don't like losing control. That's what it comes down to. That's my opinion. I can't reach another conclusion. I just can't. I don't know how you can reach another conclusion, right? Like you could say, oh, this is consumer protection. Okay, fine. Consumer protection. You could say, oh, without the intermediaries, people could get scammed. It's like, dude, yes. Like Bitcoin and self-custody takes a tremendous amount of personal responsibility, but so does driving a car, right? So does taking care of a child, right? Like if you want to take care of your body and you want to remain in shape, what does that require? It takes personal responsibility. So you're trying to tell me that money can't function without an intermediary? That money can't function without the government? Is that the argument that you're trying to make for me? I'm sorry. Listen, Bitcoin would not exist if the government was responsible with money. In the Genesis block, it literally says, Chancellor on the brink of the second bailout for banks. It literally says it in the Genesis block. And that is Satoshi signaling to the world that he's lost confidence that the government isn't going to devalue people's money. So we trusted them. The United States pivoted away from the gold standard in 1971. And now there's no barriers. They could just print. And as much as this is seen, printing money, as much as it's seen as like, oh, it's harmless. No, it's not harmless. It's theft. This is what you guys have to get into your brains. Money printing is a form of theft, and it is the most insidious form of theft because it doesn't steal from everybody in a society. It steals from the people that need money the most, which are the lower and middle classes that don't have the means to save in assets. If that is not insidious, if that is not plain evil, I don't know what is. And I'm not saying that the people that are, we can get into that argument, but I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that the people that made this system are twirling their mustaches and they're scheming and they're saying, we're going to take over the world. Maybe some of you guys think that, especially in the Rumble chat. But what I am saying is that the very architecture of the system causes a certain outcome that hurts the vast majority of people and only benefits the few. What Bitcoiners are advocating for is, hey, listen, I don't care if you're the president. I don't care if you're a nation state. And by the way, Hester Pierce also mentioned this in her press release. I don't care who you are. There's rules without rulers, and everybody must follow the exact same rules as everybody else. Nobody has special rights. What do you think is a much more fair system between those two? I'll leave it up to you guys. Opti, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
Yeah, obviously, if you guys have been around for a while, you're very familiar with Hester Pierce. She's been nicknamed Crypto Mom for a long time because she's been a huge advocate for Bitcoin, and in particular was at the SEC under Gary Gensler. And she and Gary Gensler butt heads, constantly over there. And we all thought Gary Gensler was going to be a great, head of the SEC because of the whole MIT blockchain course. What I find to be the most interesting is since we got the joint announcement from the CFTC and the SEC, we have been seeing, I guess for lack of better terms, maybe like a culture shift going on at the SEC. And hopefully these principles are what is guiding not just Hester Pierce, but, you know, head chair Paul Atkins as well, and then everyone else over there at the SEC. If this is what we are going to see moving further with the SEC, then I think that's going to be very beneficial for especially Bitcoin. But for this industry at large, like I've been saying for a while that I think the most clarity we're probably going to get is from the SEC and the CFTC. I'm not as bullish on the Clarity Act in itself because we've already seen some pretty good news coming out of the SEC and the CFTC. Obviously, with the Clarity Act, that would give institutions, I guess, you know, a little less worries and deploy more capital into Bitcoin. But from what we've seen with the SEC and the CFTC already, that's probably the best clarity we're going to get. And if you hear this and you read what she said, you know, free code of speech, if you are using non-custodial Bitcoin wallets, if no one is at the head of your quote unquote decentralized blockchain, there's no corporation there, then you are not a security. You know, peer-to-peer payments are cool. All of that is stuff that you would love to hear from the SEC, considering that we have been attacked by the SEC for a lot of years, basically up until just recently. The only thing about this that is probably a little bit concerning is that there's rumors that Hester Pierce is probably going to be leaving in November. So, you know, it's like
Senator Lummis,
Hester Pierce. And so this is why I started this with saying I am hoping that this is part of a broader culture shift from the SEC. And it's not just what we saw during the Gary Gensler SEC era, where it's like, you know, you have one dissenting voice, that's cool, but they're being, you know, shot down by the head of the SEC. What we have seen from Paul Atkins, though, the new SEC chair, the new head of the SEC, is he has been very recently been a lot more pro-Bitcoin, a lot more, I would say, progressive in terms of how to view Bitcoin and how they should be, you know, judging Bitcoin companies in the industry at large. So I think this could be a good, maybe a sampling of what the new SEC culture will be. But again, the biggest kind of concern about this is the rumors that Hester Pierce is probably going to go back to teaching. She's been interim SEC commissioner for like a year now. I think now we don't know, but the dates that I saw is like she might be gone around November. So will this stand? Will this last? I don't know. I hope so.
My opinion is this is the first generation, and they're pioneers, right? I have to give a shout out where a shout out is due. Shout out to Senator Lummis. Shout out to Hester Pierce. Guys, this is a movement, right? And ultimately the government is formed by people, right? So you're going to have more and more people that are holding bags of Bitcoin in all facets of society. You're going to have people that are holding Bitcoin that work in corporations. You're going to have people that hold Bitcoin that are in government. And again, no one is better than their incentives. So it's unfortunate that Senator Lummis is not running for re-election. It's unfortunate that Hester Pierce, if the rumors are true, is going to be stepping down. However, next man up, right? Next woman up. That's what it comes down to. Like, this is a revolution at the end of the day. And it's not dependent on a single person. This is a movement, guys. This is a movement. This is the separation of money and state. We try to be at the front lines of it. We try to keep you guys updated, but this is the latest. I know it might not be as bullish and like, oh my God, the price is going up, and oh my God, like look at all these things, look at what all these things are doing. However, we are a show that focuses on the separation of money and state. This is the front line of it. This is the front line. Open source developers should be protected by the First Amendment in the United States. That is not up for the debate.
Code is speech.
Code is speech. All right, everybody. Let's hit the culture segment. We're going to do a quick vibe check, and then we're going to wrap up the show. We're going to be right back in just a little bit. I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy, HIVE has quadrupled its global Bitcoin mining footprint and channels that same scale into high performance compute, where their AI cloud is now ranked #1 in the world for network performance. At HIVE, you've got dual engines, Bitcoin and AI humming, roaring, accelerating in unison. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're rewriting the playbook on sustainable digital infrastructure. You can catch the latest buzz at Hive Digital Tech or at hivedigitaltech.com.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, sat123.com. Sovereignty isn't just about your money, it's about your communications too. When the grid goes down, most people go dark. Cell towers fail, and hurricanes, cyber attacks, and blackouts. But satellite phones, they don't rely on local infrastructure. Iridium has 77 satellites in orbit, giving you a direct line anywhere in the US, even offshore. If you hold your own Bitcoin keys, you should hold your own comms too. Sat123.com also has everything you need to start building your Bitcoin citadel. Starlink, battery backups, Faraday bags to protect your hardware wallets, and much, much more. It's a one-stop shop for anyone serious about resilience and off-grid independence. Stay connected, stay independent, stay sovereign. Go to sat123.com/simply today and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store.
All right, everybody, we are back. Let's do a quick vibe check, and then we'll wrap up today's show because we are running a little bit long.
How bored is everyone? That's the vibe. Yesterday it was like, is bottom in? Let's circle back to how bored are we so we can reel this back into the James checkmatey clip we played earlier. Actually, we'll start with us. You already know my view, I think. But Nico, what's your vibe check? How bored are you? I am so bored.
I mean, like, it's just like, I think a lot of people had expectations for 2025. And I think that because those expectations weren't hit, you start looking at the clock and you're like, holy cow, I've been in this for 10 years.
And 5 of them I've literally round tripped.
And I've round tripped what, like 3 market cycles.
Yeah, we're idiots. All right, let's circle back to we are actually idiots.
I think Bitcoin not hitting 100K in 2021 because of the China mining ban. And then again, this specific cycle, Bitcoin topping on apathy and not euphoria, I think not only brings in boredom, but it also brings in disillusionment, right? So I think it's a combination of those two things. If you are class of 2025, welcome to the Bitcoin roller coaster. You are paying your price of tuition. If you're class of 2020, 2021, again, welcome to the Bitcoin roller coaster. You're paying the price of tuition. If you're from the previous classes, you've been here before. I think that this time, you know, the fireworks, the party time that we all expected, right? Because here's the thing about Bitcoin. You suffer for like 2 or 3 years to get 3 or 4 months of party time. This time, we suffered
for 5 years.
For 5 years. And the party happened, but they turned on the lights. Like, let's say the nightclub opened at like, you know, midnight. They turned on the lights at like 12:45.
Did they turn on the lights before? While the girl was saying, I like you.
They turned on the lights before the headline DJ even came in, right? Like, that's the vibes I'm feeling this cycle, dude. Those are the vibes I'm feeling this cycle.
I'm bored. It's brutal. Like, it's crazy because we have heard so much good news, right? Like, we've heard insane news stories. In the past year and a half, the amount of news stories that we've covered on the show that in previous cycles would have made the price rip, we're like round tripping. We're back to 2020 for prices.
Bro, we had fake headlines in 2017 of the institutions coming, and it would make the price of Bitcoin rip 25% in a day. All right. Now we're getting headlines that a single individual is buying tens of thousands of coins and the price does not effing move. The only headline that broke in the last 1 or 2 weeks that actually moved the needle somewhat
was Sailor selling
32 Bitcoin and it dumped the price 20%, right? So I think right now,
I guess that's just peak bear market stuff.
So right now, I think the only headline that would move the needle is a United States Strategic Bitcoin Reserve not happening, right? At least this election cycle. And the only thing that would move the needle is the Clarity Act passing. And right now, Polymarket has that at 49%, right? So the days of headlines moving the prices, at least to the upside, I think are over, unless like you have some crazy announcement. And like, here's the thing about the SpaceX IPO, right? And I know that Opti feels certain ways about Elon. Here's the thing about the SpaceX IPO.
Dude, I'm just a flat earther, okay?
The most ironic part about that is that both Tesla and SpaceX are one of the largest holders of institutional Bitcoin, and Elon hasn't said a thing. So he's playing both sides, dude.
Well, it's also crazy because what we are hearing through this SpaceX merger is the broader conversation that SpaceX and Tesla the SpaceX IPO is that Tesla and SpaceX will likely merge sometime soon.
Are you saying I'm getting a flying car?
No, what I'm saying is if they do merge, they will hold over 30,000 coins, and they will be like the third largest Bitcoin treasury company. And
that actually has revenue,
that has cash flow.
That has cash flow.
Yeah. So and run by the richest man in the world. So like, hey,
who owns X as well?
Yeah, who owns Twitter exactly. So, you know, maybe the SpaceX IPO isn't all bad. Like, yes, you know, most people are probably going to get wrecked. As we know, you know, they changed the rules for the SpaceX IPO. So it's pretty much instantly going into people's 401ks. They have found the exit liquidity they wanted. But if it
so fucked up.
if it does merge with Tesla, that's the third. I think it's the third. If I remember here, let me double check, and then we can wrap up today's show. And I believe it would be the third largest. No, it'd be somewhere around fifth. So it'd be bigger than Bullish, somewhere around Bitcoin Standard Treasury Company. And number 5 is 30,021. So it'll be somewhere between 6th or 5th largest Bitcoin treasury company in the world. If SpaceX does merge with Tesla, which is kind of the broader rumors that we are hearing with the SpaceX IPO. So hey, look, I know we're all tired here. I know, hey, boss, I'm tired. I'm tired, boss. You know, we're worn out. But the game doesn't change. You got to remember what the game is. You're trying to hold Bitcoin for the long term. The best way to win this game is by just continuously acquiring Bitcoin every chance you get. I think what does wear down a lot of people, and I actually had a conversation with one of my friends. He was in town this weekend, and I could just tell by the way he was talking that the prevailing idea in his mind is like, I just buy it once and then I get rich. And I'm like, no, dude, like you need to just save in it. You need to just constantly save in it. And yes, you know, our net worth, if you have a net worth, it's cut 50% in half. But if you accumulate it, continue to accumulate it for a long time, that's how you win this game. So
yep,
that the game hasn't changed. The game plan hasn't changed for us. It's just we're getting beat up in the third quarter, but we're gonna win. We're gonna win the game. All right, we're gonna win the game,
guys. I want to give a shout out to Mining Disrupt. It's the largest Bitcoin mining conference in the world. It's coming up next month, July 21st through the 23rd, Miami, Florida. You definitely don't want to miss it. Get your tickets now. Scan the QR code on your screen. Use promo code SimplyBitcoin to get 20% off. Mining Disrupt 2026, July 21st through the 23rd, the largest Bitcoin mining conference in the world in Miami, Florida. You definitely don't want to miss it. Get your tickets now before prices increase. Again, use promo code SIMPLY to get 20% off. All right, everybody. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We love you guys. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for holding us down during the bear market. We appreciate it. If you guys want to support the show, the number one thing you guys could do is check out our partners. Check out, buy yourself a Bitcoin.
Wait, watch the videos.
Watch the videos, but check out our partners, guys. We are very selective on who we choose to partner with. They're awesome Bitcoin companies, all of them. And they're tools that you can use on your Bitcoin journey, right? So anyways, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's Simply Bitcoin Live, and we'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode. Take care, everybody.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.